Are you curious about the unknown, the unexplainable? Do you find yourself intrigued by the mysterious and paranormal side of our world? Join us on an adventure into the world of inexplicable discoveries and investigations that may someday give us a final answer as to what may be behind a veil of reality. Then it's time to turn your pods up, because we're live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia. It's time once again for Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. The universe is waiting for you.
Live to tape from the mountains of West Virginia, it's another episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Let's Find Out, stretching back from his childhood right through his adult life, our guest has had experiences with the paranormal, alien abductions to encountering strange and mystical beings. He will give us a look into his life with his new book, High Strangeness, a lifetime of alien and paranormal encounters. Please welcome to Let's Find Out UFO and paranormal witness, author Michael Kameron. Michael, my friend, thank you for coming on the show to share this haunting story with us.
Thank you, Diego, for having me on.
Yes, absolutely. And, and I think my introduction doesn't even do any justice to the lifetime of experience that you have and what your book brings to the readers. Let's get right to it. Well, we're talking about an early age because I've talked to the listeners and prior guests before this, and I've said my experiences started, at least in paranormal, never a UFO one, from the age of 3 onward. How young were you when you first started having these experiences?
Well, I grew up in a house that was haunted, so it was a lot of poltergeist activity. So when, I was born premature, I was an unexpected child. And when I was brought back from, the hospital, what would then be my home, childhood home. So there was encounters occurring around me, even when I was in the crib, from eyewitness accounts from my family. There was balls of light flying over and around my cot. There was strange entities that were standing over, looking down at me, so it started, I guess, from there. But from me as a child, I would say from around the ages of 4 onwards, really. It may have been even younger than that. I just don't remember that. I remember mostly from 4 years.
And it's possibly definitely happened probably as soon as you came out, because with me at least, I remember at a very young age. It could have been younger than 3, but sometimes we don't have those kind of memories. Our family members might, but I'm trying to get ahead of myself. So right where you were born, did your family have any experiences prior to you having experiences?
Yeah, I believe my mum was an abductee, and also my dad had. My dad was a flight engineer in the Royal Air Force during World War II, and my mum was, she worked in the munitions factories building Lancaster bomber aircraft during the war. But both of them did have these type of experiences, but they didn't really talk about them because they both, they were both strict Roman Catholics. I don't really think they understood what they were.
Wow, and in that time, I pretty much guessing you and I were pretty close in age. We grew up in the same times.
Yeah.
It wasn't as fashionable to tell people these stories, especially not to the media or in the magazines, unless there was a lot of underground magazines that were discussing these type of topics. But you would hear, at least in the privacy of your own homes, with the family members were actually telling you these stories, and at least in my part, it's been very active. Did you also have that type of things in a private setting? Because back then, like I said, you didn't really go in public.
No, I mean, my family, they were very secretive. But I think, at one time when I was writing my book, for example, I did think, oh, that was strange. But when you look at the times and just after the Second World War, I think a lot of people back in them times were secretive. They kept things to themselves. It was just part of how they were, how they dealt with things during those, the war times. But it wasn't until much later on that my dad, every now and again, he would tell me things, or my mum might say something to me, but mostly they wasn't that open about speaking about it. If anything, they would speak to two of my older brothers that I mentioned in the book, Francis and Kevin, who are, as I explain in my book, they're a lot older than me and Sean. Me and Sean are basically, around. I'm the youngest, and Sean's 2 years older than me. But Francis and Kevin were a lot older than us. When we were still at junior school, they'd already left and gone out to work. So there's a big age difference.
And speaking of your book, and I know that the process of making a book is not very easy. I think it can be very difficult. As you were writing down the notes and then started typing the book up, did you start recollecting more and more stories that you've forgotten about, and you were like, "Oh my god, this is what happened." Did you put that in the book, or is this something?
There was a lot. It was quite difficult to write the book. I mean, I always knew for quite a long time that I would write a book. I just didn't know when. And sometimes I went to write it and the time wasn't right. But the book was quite difficult for me to write because I have complex PTSD, and as a result of the experiences I had as a child and teenager, and so it's difficult to you're reliving it again. It's not like you're writing a book and you're writing about other people's experiences. It's very
Right.
personal, and so there's a lot of trauma coming up when you're reliving those experiences. But again, it's very therapeutic. It's very healing, and there's lots of the book that I've written. It's not just about the alien abduction. It's not just about the paranormal. It incorporates as well the experiences I had with my family, with my dad, and it's very personal in that way as well. So, and the experiences I underwent with my family as well, and it's brought up a lot. It brought up a lot of emotional, experiences with that in that way. So it was deeply, it was quite hard going sometimes. There was a lot of blood and a lot of tears, really. But but I think that's some of the best stories come from that process.
Right. And you were talking about, I'll call it like emotional scars based upon your experiences with the alien abduction. What about the physical? Has did anything change in your body? Did you start having any sort of negative health effects from these abductions?
Yeah, so like because you have complex PTSD, it's the trauma. So, and it's also to do with the fragmented memories the trauma comes from. So it's not just the emotional and the psychological. You do have physical effects as well that come up in your body. You have headaches, you have backache, you have stomach problems. And again, you have the panic attacks. You have the flashbacks, the nightmares. So there's and also phobias that come from this. It's like for me, I can't never turn my light off. When I sleep, I have to keep it on all the time, and that in itself is a problem because even though you have your eyes closed, you can still see the light through your eyelids, and so that can cause problems in regards to how you sleep. It causes a lot of fatigue, and you can get tired, irritated, agitated. So there's lots of things that arise from these experiences. And we're not talking about the paranormal, we're talking about the abductions that have occurred, and a lot of the time now, I'm in my lab, so I'm a military abductee, and it's the experiences that come from this as well.
If you don't mind, let's go over that part of the abduction. What exactly is that for those listeners that haven't heard that terminology?
Well, my lab means military abductee, so it's in a way being used on secret military projects. And again, this is an area that I'm still exploring. There's a lot of fragmented memories with this, and for a long time I've been alone with it. I've not had the opportunity to mix with other my labs. It's only now that I'm actually beginning to do this, and in a way that's helpful because you're sharing memories, and you might be able to help each other in some ways. I might know something, they might know something. We might be able to get a bigger picture. And it's also to do with a lot of research into it. I'm still exploring that aspect of myself, but I'm also, undergoing the trauma from that as well.
And by going through this trauma you've had the majority of your life, who do you talk to about this, especially on the physical part? Because I don't think that there's something you can just go to a doctor and say, "This is what happened. Can you give me an X-ray or do a physical on me?" How do you go about helping that situation, at least the physical part?
For the majority of my life, I've been on my own with it. There's no one to talk to. I mean, when I was a child, the only people I had around me that I could talk to were, I would say a doctor or the priests that were around me. But the priests wanted to send you to hell, and the doctors wanted to put you under the Mental Health Act and section you under the Mental Health Act. And as I explained in my book, for something which wasn't to do with alien abduction at the time, it was to do with a sighting of my dad who passed, and I had an encounter as well outside of the body, which was similar to an NDE and near-death experience, but it wasn't that. The rainbow of light, that is quite common with the NDEs, and I saw my dad, and I explained this to my doctor, and he wanted to put me under the Mental Health Act and section me, but it's only because my mum intervened that she stopped that. Wow. But as I explain in my book, what if I would have said to him, "Well, you know what? I'm having abductions by non-human entities." He would have thrown away the key. So in them times, it was difficult. We didn't have social media back then. So there was hardly any. There was no one really you could turn to. Even now, I mean, I didn't start to explore this side of myself until the late 1990s. So, and even then, there was hardly any literature around. There was really no one to talk to. And throughout my life, I've been alone with it. It's been very difficult. And it's also, you have trust issues. Who can you trust? And like many of us in these communities that have had these experiences, you've undergone a lot of, when you have decided to tell people, a lot of ridicule.
Yeah, I don't. I understand that completely. And not to cut you off, because we're talking about you're finally now into your adult life, and you're actually written the book. You're in social media. You finally came out with this story. How has anybody reached out to you who's also had experiences and had a chat with you about it, or try to give you maybe a little bit of I don't know, suggestions or anything like that as far as what you can do?
I do, I've done a lot of work on myself now. It's and you do. This is how you get through it. But I do have a few people that I can talk to. But I'm coming again more and more into contact with the MyLab stuff now, really. So I think that will be going forward. That's the next stage for me, to explore this side of myself and try to get some clearer memories and answers to a lot of the stuff, some sort of closure with it.
Now, if you don't mind me asking, because I hate to ask this question, but I'm going to anyway. You can stop me. Aside from the military part of this, about how many times do you think you've actually been abducted through your life?
I don't know really. I had a lot of abductions when I was 4. They carried on into my teenage years, as a young adult, and you know, I do have some still to this day, but they're not as many as they were. I can't really put a figure on it, but it's been quite a lot. And you know, there were times when it seemed like the abductions were much more serious in their content than other times. So, but you know, now it seems to be it's changed somewhat. There's a slowing down of the actual abductions by the Greys, by these particular, you know, entities or beings that I've had contact with. It's moving more again to do with, you know, I guess like technology being used against you, and military, really. Anything to do with the military. You know, I would describe myself as a MyLab that is used as a spy outside of the body on these particular programs.
Wow, because you actually, I was going to ask the Greys, as you were speaking, I was thinking, well, what did what did you see? Because I know you mentioned the Greys. What else did you see? Anything? Did you see it inside of a? Were you inside of a ship? Was it in a terrestrial on Earth on a hospital? Like what I'm thinking is maybe is something that maybe the military and the extraterrestrials are both maybe conducting these experiments on you, have some sort of working agreement.
Well, in my book, I do describe one called the surveillance booth, which is basically one where I describe being taken to a place by my dad. You know, it's in the winter months. And what I remember of it from my book, what I've described in my book, is being at the back of what looks like an old Victorian type building because of the brickwork and the staircase leading up to a door at the top. And when I go into the door, I go into, you know, into another room. And what I believe is my dad is behind me. When I go into this room, I turn around and the door's locked from the outside. And I'm in the room on my own, you know, which is quite terrifying. I'm only, you know, I would be at an age just below the age of 10. And when I'm in the room, it's the only thing in the room. The room's white. There's a table there which is bolted to the floor, with a chair which is similar in color and design, bolted to the floor. And just behind where I would sit down, I'd have my back to what would be like a booth protruding out from the wall and the ceiling, and it's got black glass on it. You know, back then you know, it would probably be a surveillance, you know, room. And when I sat in the chair, it was only a few minutes would pass, I guess, and I found myself outside of my body. I didn't know what it was at the time, but I could see myself sitting down, and I was standing. So then I moved up towards the booth where the glass was, and I was able to move through it. And when I moved through it, I could see on the left-hand side of where I was, there was a man looking at some screens. He had a white lab coat on. There was a lady there with long dark hair and glasses with a white lab coat on, looking at what would be a clipboard and ticking something off of this. And then on the other side of her, on the right-hand side, was my dad, who was sat down on this chair. And then the only thing I remember then is I was back at home. It was nighttime and I was in bed. And I have no memory of what happened there or how I got back into, you know, my bedroom. So this was obviously a military facility of some sort. I mean, at the time, I wasn't sure what it was, but later on, after I wrote my book, I did have some flashbacks, which actually brought me back to this particular time, but showed me a little bit more. And it did show me it was a military facility. I'm not sure where it was. I mean, my speculation was it could have been Tavistock in London, you know, which is a psychological warfare centre. Which normally carries out, you know, activities against the general public.
And how does your part of the world? Because I pretty much know how in the United States here how they handle information with disclosure and UFOs, even with paranormal. They can take it with a grain of salt. You know, they can give you information or to be disinformation at the same time. But how is the subject of UFOs, UAPs handled over there in the UK?
I think it's just, you know, I think there's a lot more work to be done in the UK. We're moving in a steady pace, but I think it's still, for instance, with alien abductees, I don't think there's enough information in regards to this subject. I mean, we don't have people we can go to, as far as I know here, that are, for support groups. We don't have anything to do with aggression, hardly now. They don't hardly do it, So it's difficult if you had an abductee and they wanted to go to somebody to have regression. That is, I think pretty sure under the British Hypnotic Association, they don't generally believe in that now. You often find it's to do with past life experiences and things of this sort. I was even warned recently that if I tried to do that, I should be careful, and because they don't agree with that. So I think there's a lot more work to be done in the UK with this. There's a lot more available in the United States, but we have got a lot of good researchers working towards, I guess, trying to get disclosure or get answers.
Yeah, because at least here in the United States, it's more part of our culture now than anything else. Same thing with paranormal and cryptids. But I've slowly seen a rise in paranormal research groups in the UK lately, and it kind of seems like it's now catching up with the rest of us. Not that you were behind, but I think it's easier now to digest that information than it was before.
Yeah, I mean, we got really good people here. I mean, we've got my publisher, Philip Mantle. He's been doing it like for decades. You got Paul Sinclair, who done the forward for my book. Malcolm Robinson, you got the Kinsella twins, Philip and Ronald Kinsella. So, these are really, good investigators. You got Colin Keatley, who's a, cryptic, Bigfoot and Dogman hunter, investigative on the grounds researcher, So you got people out there that are trying to get, this information out. And, as we know now, these different types of subjects to paranormal alien abduction, even my labs and targeted individuals and, the cryptozoology, it's all part of the same phenomena. It's not separated as once we first thought. We were putting these types of encounters into different boxes, but we now know it's all interconnected in some way.
I agree. 100% that it all has to do with each other. Definitely interconnected. And I know we spent a lot of times talking about the extraterrestrial portion of your book, but we only touched on the paranormal part because you mentioned earlier on the episode that you had an experience with a poltergeist and orbs. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's around when I was a baby in the cot.
Anything after that? Because it seems mostly that you are being, I want to use the word targeted, not as a disrespectful way, but maybe you tagged for, I guess, for a lifetime of observation by extraterrestrials. But it works a little bit different with the paranormal aspect of it, I think.
Yeah, I mean, when I was a child, I was a very sensitive child as well. There was times when I was able to move objects. I was able to do telekinesis, and this was tested within the medical community, professions. I don't know the outcome of that. I was too young, and my parents never mentioned it. All I know is that I actually went to some place and I was tested for psychic abilities, and this was for what would be the National Health Service in the UK. So there was obviously somebody interested in those type of abilities that I had, but where that information went, I don't know. I have tried to access my medical records, but I've not at the moment been successful. It might be that they've destroyed them, going right back at them times.
Because here there's the Freedom of Information Act where you can actually request these items or information. Is there something similar in the UK?
I think that, yeah, there is, but it all depends, I think, on how far that goes back. I think up to a certain point they keep some and destroy the others. But I believe it's probably retained somewhere, but we just not allowed to have or see it. I'm still trying to do that because it would be interesting to see what would be on those records from the time when I was an infant or a young child.
Right, and it could be one of those cases to where this information, just like when they have retrieval from ships that crash on Earth to try to maybe study it, do a little bit of, I guess, reverse engineer the information if that's possible, but at least technology.
Hmm. Sure.
So, which brings us to where can the listeners of Let's find out more about your book and where can they purchase it?
Yeah, my book's available on Amazon. It's in soft cover, hard cover. It's on Kindle and audio book. If anyone wants to contact me, they can find me on Facebook under Michael Kameron. That's with a K for Cameron. And if you want to reach out to me or speak to me, I'm available. I never turn anyone away. And, always there for if anyone wants to talk about anything.
Great. That's it's a beautiful thing that you said. And then you said it was published by Flying Disc Press, correct?
That's right. Yeah, Philip Mantle, the man himself.
No, I heard great things about him, especially from Jesse. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. It's just doing a half hour doesn't do justice to your lifetime of stories, but it's also perfect so that way the listeners can go ahead and download and read your book. So,
Sure.
my friend, thank you for coming on. Let's find out. And if you do, and I know you just came out with the book not too long ago, if you decide to publish another book, I would love to have you back and then discuss further more about your life, what's been going on from now till then.
I'm actually writing number 2 now. And
Okay.
yeah, that's the follow on. That one will probably have a trigger warning on it. I'm writing also, I'm going to be writing a book 3, which centers around people on the spectrum that are very much have these type of experiences. I think there's a connection with people that are autistic and have ADHD, however, more so than people that are typical, outside of the spectrum. There seems to be, I think, from people that I've met, there's a huge amount of people that seem to have these, are neurodiverse, they're on the spectrum, that are either alien abductees or have encounters with the UAPs or other aspects of the paranormal. So I think there's a link somewhere in that.
Yes, and hopefully with all of us working together, we can actually find an answer to why these things are happening. And hopefully you can find some answer yourself, my friends. But again, thank you
Sure.
for coming on. Let's find out with me, co-host Diego. And definitely when that second book comes out, let me know, man. I'll have you right back on.
Lovely. Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you, my friend. This has been another excellent episode of Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. Please check us out on Spotify, Audible, and all our social media pages. We're on YouTube and also on Rumble. Thank you for taking this journey with me. Until next time, my friends.
Thank you for listening to Let's Find Out with co-host Diego. We're on Spotify, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, and on Anchor. For more information about Let's Find Out with co-host Diego, please visit us on Facebook.com/co-host Diego, on Twitter at co-host_Diego, and on Instagram as co-host Diego. Copyright co-host Diego. All content for Let's Find Out is the property of co-host Diego and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, co-host Diego, or Let's Find Out. The information shared on Let's Find Out is provided on an as-is basis with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.